Hello and welcome back to Sisters in Scripture. We are your hosts, Brooke and Natalie. Thank you for being here today. We are going to be continuing the end of Matthew with our recap. And I know we started posting Mark and its readings, but the last recap was just way too long to put it all into one. So today we're going to recap Matthew 26, 27, and 28. And then next week we will transition into a recap for Mark. We finished off talking about last week with Jesus kind of giving the disciples the last kind of explanation of what was about to happen, talking about the end times, then predicting his death again, and just trying to communicate with them like what they're about to see and what they're about to witness, because as much as I think they probably heard him, they weren't hearing him. That would be really hard for me to accept and to just be okay with. And so I think that's a lot what was going on. So when we transition into chapter 26, we start seeing a lot more of the Last Supper, but also about Judas and what that whole process was like. And so one thing we wanted to note beforehand, just to kind of set this up, is who Judas was to Jesus, because as much as we know Judas as the betrayer, Judas walked with Jesus, 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 3 years. That's a long time. And if you have any friends that you have been best friends with for 3 years, think about that friendship. And then more so because they walked daily with each other. They camped together. They ate together. He was watching Jesus do miracles. He was a part of the preaching. He was in all of it. And so going into this, not only is it shocking that Judas did betray him, but it's also probably shocking for all the other disciples. For Judas to be in the same room with all of them and experience the same things he did, and then to watch him then turn around and betray Jesus the way that he did. And it's got me thinking, as we've been studying this, on Judas's intention in betraying Jesus. Obviously, we don't know it because it wasn't specific with his intention, other than the fact that he wanted money out of it. He went to the Pharisees and basically said, "What will you give me if I turn him over to you?" And so he obviously wanted money, but part of me wonders if he thought that he was almost like setting Jesus up and testing God in a way. And the only reason I say this is because he thought that Jesus was supposed to be like a gladiator and leading the revolt and creating his new kingdom and being the king of Israel. And so if he were arrested, that would force him into bringing out his God power, right? And starting that revolt and taking over the Roman Empire and demolishing everything. And so obviously this is just my own mind and the things that I've thought of, but I could see that. I could see him maybe in his own mind and in his own flesh thinking like, I'm going to spur on this revolution. I'm going to be the one that's like going to spearhead this because I'm going to go turn him in and I'm going to put him in the position to do so. Obviously that's crazy, but I could see it. I don't know. Yeah. What do you think?
I've never heard that, but it makes sense because like you said, like he was a zealot, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Simon was a zealot, but I think he was a part of a zealot type group because he was in Iscariot, which was his family, but I think they did some zealot type things.
Yeah.
He was an aggressive guy and really wanted the aggression.
The Roman Empire to be gone, and
right.
he really thought that Jesus was going to
bring that about.
Yeah. I've never thought about that before, but that's very interesting.
What got me thinking of that was The Chosen. When I was watching it, it kind of gave that idea that was part of his motivation in doing it, and so it kind of had me start thinking about that deeper because even though he maybe didn't believe he was God, because we'll talk about that in a second, it kind of explains that here in Matthew, he did see him as his rabbi and as his teacher and as the Messiah. And so it's like he may have not thought he was the Son of God, but he also respected his teachings and walked with him and loved him. And so there's a lot of emotion that I'm sure went into all of that. So anyways, let's talk about it. Let's dig into it. So we're going to start, and the first part of chapter 26 kind of just explains the plot against Jesus. And so he was basically saying the Passover's in 2 days. The Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. So he announces it one more time to his disciples. And then it says in verse 4 and 5, it says they schemed to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him, but not during the festival, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. So what's going on with that is right now, Passover week was a celebration with the Jews to celebrate the exodus of all of the Israelites being taken out of Egypt. Okay, so that was why they had Passover week. And so the very last day, or I guess it was the start of Passover, is like the day of the festival before the Passover actually begins, where everybody came into Jerusalem. So people from Capernaum, from Sidon, from Tyre, from all the Bethany and Nazareth, all the surrounding areas, they all come into Jerusalem, those who were Jewish and who, worshiped God and all of that. And they had this big festival together, and then they would have the Passover dinner. And before the Passover dinner, they would sacrifice the lambs for the dinner. And so what's kind of cool, and I learned this recently, I don't remember if I said this last week, but at the Last Supper, which was Jesus's dinner with the disciples, they actually did that before the Passover began. And so they didn't have a lamb at that dinner. Jesus was there. And so the symbolism of that is that Jesus was a sacrificial lamb for that dinner. And then the timeline of Passover that year actually happened to where when Jesus was crucified, it was estimated to be the same time that they were sacrificing all the animals for Passover. Which is kind of crazy. Did I say that last week?
No.
Yeah. So you're looking at me and I was like, am I repeating myself?
No, you didn't.
So that was kind of cool, or not cool, sad, but also cool that there's so many behind the scenes things going on too. So anyways, they're all gathered. Everybody is in the city. Everybody's at Jerusalem. And so they don't want to arrest Jesus in the middle of this festival because so many people love Jesus. I mean, yes, they were against him, but the rest of the Jews and most of the people in the area at this time were praising him. And he was the Messiah. I mean, he came in riding a donkey and they were saying Hosanna and waving palm trees. So there wasn't like this huge "we hate Jesus" movement going on. It was a very specific group of people. So they wanted to be discreet about it. So then Judas comes to them and he basically says, "What are you going to give me if I deliver them over?" They counted him 30 pieces of silver. So from then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Okay, so then it transitions to the Last Supper. So imagine this, if you are Judas, or just put yourself here. He has decided he's going to betray Jesus. He's made this decision. He's gotten the silver. And now he's going to have this dinner with Jesus and all of the disciples where they're going to talk about everything. He doesn't know what they're going to talk about, but it's obviously like the last. He keeps saying, this is our last meal. This is like, I'm about to be crucified. You're about to see me pass them. You're about to see me die. So everything is leading up to this moment. And so what I want to note specifically about this portion of the Last Supper is it says in verse 20, when evening came, Jesus was reclined at the table with the 12. While they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." They were very sad and began to say to him one after the other, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." Okay, so surely you don't mean me, Lord. And I have Lord circled there because it's important. Jesus replies, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of God. It would have been better for him if he had never been born." Verse 25, then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." What does your Bible say right there?
Mine says, "Is it I, Rabbi?"
Is it I, Rabbi? Okay, So Jesus answered, "You have said so." So he didn't come out and say it's going to be Judas. But what I want to note there is that everybody there recognized him as Lord except for Judas. And so I think that that's something to recognize for ourselves, is like, you can believe in Jesus. You can believe that Jesus was Jesus. You can believe that all of this happened and that all of this was true, but do you believe that he is God? Do you believe that he held that same power and that he was God walking on this earth, right? And so, because there's a big difference. It says in Luke, even the demons believe and shudder. And so we have to recognize that. But then I think it brings up a good point, which is what I want to discuss with you, which would be, do we think that Judas was saved? Do we think that Judas is in heaven?
I don't know. And I don't know if we will ever know until we get there. And it's not really for us to determine. But whenever you pointed that out about everyone else saying, "Is it me, Lord?" and then Judas said, "Is it me, Rabbi?" I looked down at the study portion of my Bible, and it does say, Judas addressed him as Rabbi or teacher. There is no record of Judas ever calling Jesus Lord, which is interesting. Yeah. So it may be that he didn't believe he was the Lord. Maybe, like you said, he was waiting for him to come and conquer Rome.
And to believe out of sight.
Yes. Yeah. And not by everything that he was doing right in front of him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that when you have kind of a preconceived notion in your head of who you think God is supposed to be, when he lets you down, you almost think, well, then he's not God, or he's not consistent. And it's like, well, is he consistent with what you think he should be, or is he consistent with who he really is?
Yeah.
And they had a scene in The Chosen that they were talking, Jesus and Judas are talking back and forth before Judas actually decides to go and betray him and get the money from the Pharisees. And Jesus says to him, basically, like, why are you... Well, basically, Judas is complaining and saying, like, why are you not doing anything? Why they're about to kidnap or arrest you and kill you, and you're not doing anything about it? Like, I don't understand. And Jesus just looks at him and said, do you trust me? And trust that everything that I have done was me and was good. He's like, well, yes, of course I believe you're the Messiah. Like, of course I believe you. He said, do you love me? Do you trust me? He's like, yes, of course. I will walk with you. I will go to the ends of the earth with you. And he said, then why do you think that your plan is so much better than what I'm doing right now? And I think we all do that all the time. But that's exactly what was going on here. Is Judas was frustrated and impatient with what Jesus was doing. And so instead of allowing Jesus to do what he was doing and believing that he was God, he took it in matters into his own hands. And it saved all of us. So, you know, there was a plan. But yeah, I think it's interesting to break all of this down. Because I know I have looked at the Bible sometimes as like, well, God knew all that was going to happen. Like, Judas was bound to betray him. He was born to betray him. You know, like, that had to happen so that this could happen. And it's like, okay, even if that is the case, there's still so much here for us to learn from and for us to, like, study and understand, because Judas wasn't a puppet. God wasn't walking around, like, puppeting Judas into the tabernacle to go betray Jesus. He chose to do that. So, anyways, there's a lot here. Okay, so right after all of that is explained, then it talks about Peter's denial. Now, I think Peter's denial is very interesting because Peter is one that has walked very closely with Jesus. He was one of, like, his closest 3 people. And so when Jesus is looking at him and basically saying, you're going to deny me 3 times, he's like, no, I'm not. Like, it'd be like Jesus telling me that. I'm like, there's literally no way. But there obviously was a way. It did happen. But I think it shows what fear can do to people. But it says here in chapter 26, verse 34, truly I tell you, he's talking to Peter, Jesus answered, this very night before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. So Peter declared, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. And all the other disciples said the same. So they're all sitting around a table, and he has just said, one of you is going to betray me. And they're all kind of freaking out about that. And then he says, and then one of you is going to deny me 3 times. And so to all of them, I think they're just baffled by what he's saying, the fact that he's about to die. And then he's throwing these things at them, and they're like, we've literally walked through everything with you for 3 years. How can you sit here and say that we're going to do that to you? We love you so much. But again, they had to just take it. And how many times do we have to just take what God is saying, right? And just trust and, like, just keep walking it out. It didn't say, like, you're going to disown me and then I'm going to disown you. Peter didn't have to, like, fear anything really, but, like, that is scary, right? That is overwhelming. This whole thing was very scary for them. So after they talked about Peter denying him, well, they didn't know it was Peter, but after he basically told them, one of you is going to deny me, they decide to get up, because Jesus tells them to, and go to what's called Gethsemane, which is the Garden of Gethsemane. Some people want to say that the Garden of Gethsemane was the Garden of Eden. There's no biblical evidence to that I know of, but that's a fun fact. I don't know if that's true.
Well, and didn't God place guards?
Yeah.
At the entrance to the Garden of Eden,
so that nobody would enter.
So that nobody would enter. Yes,
that's what I thought. And then I figured with the flood, probably things shifted a little when the flood happened.
Well, yeah.
So I don't know. But fun fact, that's a theory and not biblical. So anyways, they go into the garden, and I think it's interesting here that we see Jesus very overwhelmed. And it says, and I think it's Isaiah, it's one of the prophet books in the Old Testament, that the Messiah was going to be a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. And we see that here. We see that he was grieving what was to come. We saw him grieve when Lazarus died. But it says in verse 38, then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. And so he was overwhelmed in this. I don't want to say fearful, as I don't think he was scared of what was to come. I think he was just overwhelmed with the intensity of it. And I know that for Jesus, it wasn't the sword or the nails or the thorns. It was the separation from God while he was on the cross, and that time frame
I think it was all those things too.
But I think it was those things too.
Because he was also fully man, and so he experienced all of that pain.
That hurt. Like, he wasn't invincible in that.
Right. Yeah. And so I think he probably was scared.
Yeah.
And because he was saying, if this cannot, my Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done.
Yeah.
And he prayed that 3 different times.
Yeah.
So I think he was very much like, I really don't want to do this, but if this is your will, I will do it.
Yeah.
Yes, I will do it.
And I think that notes too that, like, he did have so much of what we carry in him. Like, he wasn't walking this earth different than us. He was alike in that way.
And I think it's just basic human instinct to survive.
Right.
Like, anytime that, like, I've ever been scared or anything.
Fight or flight.
Yeah. Like, all of that kicks in. And so because he was fully human, he was experiencing all of that too. And he was a little bit of self-preservation. Like, I don't want to die.
Yeah. Yep.
Even though I know it has to happen.
Yeah, even though I know it has to happen. And, I mean, I can't fathom. Like, if he's going into this knowing, like, it wasn't like it might be bad, but it might be all right. Like, I don't really know what's going to happen. No, he fully knew what was going to happen. And that's intense. And then I also think that he felt the sorrow for all the people that loved him. I think, like, Mary, his mom, and Mary, his best friend, and all the disciples, and just all the people that loved him. And he carried that, because I believe, not that he didn't love Lazarus himself, but he did. But I think part of the reason he wept when Lazarus passed, because he showed up and he saw Mary and Martha and his mom, like, weeping and so full of pain. And they were like, why were you not here? If you would have been here, he wouldn't have died. And not blaming him, but just, like, putting all of their grief onto him. And he feels that pain for us. Like, he cares so much about us that he feels that with us. And so I think that that's a lot of this too. I think it's a mix of all of it. Mm-hmm. And that's intense. That's intense. So anyways, we transition from there into him being arrested. And so it says while he was in there praying, when he was saying all of this to God, the disciples basically kept falling asleep. It was late at night. And so he came to them a few times and said, you need to get up. The spirit is willing. The flesh is weak. You need to keep watch. Get up and pray. Like, this, you guys are not getting that this is about to happen, basically. Mm-hmm. And so it says in verse 45, then he returned to the disciples and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. Not only was he, like, doing this, but he's just, like, willingly walking over there. He's like, all right, here we go.
We're doing this.
So it says, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs sent from their chief priests and elders of the people. The betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kissed is the man. Arrest him. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. Jesus replies, do what you came for, friend. I cannot. If he, that had to have crumbled Judas. Like, not only, he knew he was the Messiah, but he obviously didn't fully believe it. And so for him to walk up, betray Jesus, one of his friends, and then Jesus just look him dead in the eye and be like, I know what you're doing. Do what you came for. Friend. Like, anyways, goodness. And so then I want to touch on one more thing in this little section, is it down in verse 54. It's talking about, okay, well, we're just going to read all of it because it's really short. Basically, he said, do what you came for. The man stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. That was Peter. John totally threw him under the bus and told us that it was Peter. Nobody else did, but it was Peter. Put your sword back in its place, Jesus said to him, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put disposal more than 12 legions of angels? This part, verse 54. But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way? In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this all has taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. So the reason I wanted to read that was because I think two things happened. One, I think everything clicked for the disciples. I think that they realized, like, everything that they studied their entire lives was clicking, because it did predict a lot of this in Daniel and in Isaiah, and maybe not Daniel, Isaiah and I don't know why I'm going blank. Why am I going blank? But the
Just
prophetic books of the Bible.
Yeah, I was like, a lot of the prophecy books did.
Yeah, and so it's that stuff is clicking for them. Jesus being arrested is clicking for them. The fact that he is God and he could take all of these Romans down with literally a snap of a finger, and he's choosing not to. He stopped his disciples. So there's all these emotions going on. And then Judas, if my theory is correct, could have been standing there going, do it. Do it. Like, he's waiting for Jesus to, like, take over and, like, take out these Romans and these Pharisees and become the king. And then all he says is, I have to do this so that scriptures can be fulfilled. And then in that moment, Judas realizes, like, I was the betrayal in the scriptures. Like, I did it. Like, I just turned him over, and, like, prophecy is going to be fulfilled. That had to have been a very heavy moment, and I think that that's why it says, then all the disciples deserted him and fled. What does your transition say in verse 56?
It pretty much the same thing, but all this has taken place that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples left him and fled.
Yeah.
But also, he just got arrested, and so now he's been telling them, I'm going to get arrested, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And so now I think they are afraid for their own lives, because he just got arrested.
And he kept telling them, you guys will be persecuted.
Yeah.
And died.
Yeah.
Killed.
Killed, yeah. So I think they saw that Jesus just got arrested. They're like, oh, he's probably going to die.
Yeah.
We're next.
We got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they fled.
Yeah. And so it says then he goes to the Sanhedrin. So this is when they arrest him and they take him before the high priest, which is interesting. I didn't know this either. I learned this recently. But at the time, the temple and the tabernacle and the high priest and the Sadducees and the Pharisees, they did not have like law power. They had their temple and they had their things from the law of Moses that they believed and they followed, but they didn't have power to go arrest people. They were not the cops. The Romans were. The Roman Empire was. And so the high priest, Caiaphas, and the Roman Empire had like an agreement at the time where like they respected each other. They followed the same kind of guidelines. All the Jews still had to adhere to Roman rule and law. Yeah, mm-hmm. They still had to pay their taxes. They still had to, all of the same things. Mm-hmm. But there wasn't like, they didn't really have power to arrest. And so the fact that the high priest did arrest him and not the Roman Empire is very interesting, but also the Roman Empire didn't have a reason to arrest him because he had done nothing wrong. And that's what we see here, is that they start questioning him. So Peter's following him at a distance. The chief priests and all the Sanhedrins were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. Verse 60, but they did not find any, though many false witnesses came forward. And then it says in verse 61, finally 2 came forward and declared, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days, which he did say standing in the temple, but he was talking about himself. He wasn't talking about the building. Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But he remained silent. The high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us you are the Messiah, the Son of God. He's so sassy. He looks at them and says, you have said so, Jesus replied, but I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, he has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look now, you have heard blasphemy. What do you think? He is worthy of death. So they spit in his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped him and said, prophesy to us, Messiah, who hit you? So now they're just mocking him and making fun of him. And they really don't have anything to stand on other than the fact that he says he's God. And so that's why they felt like they could arrest him as the Pharisees and Sadducees, because he was committing blasphemy. He was wrong against their law. He was going against their God, and all these things. And so they felt justified.
Yeah. And from what I understand, like the Romans let the Pharisees and Sadducees conduct their own trials.
Yes.
And everything like that. But I don't think they could inflict punishment like jail or death. So if they had someone convicted, they could take that to the Romans and be like, hey,
this is the case.
This is the case. We have found this person guilty of this.
Handle it.
Yes.
Yeah. And crucifixion was so gruesome that it was only for Jewish people. It wasn't for...
And the worst.
Yeah, and the worst of the worst. Roman citizens could not be crucified because it was so gruesome, which is... shows you, but they crucified like the Zealots. Barabbas, the man that ended up taking, or was supposed to be crucified, and Jesus took his place. I'm pretty sure he was a zealot. I'll have to look that up and tell you guys for sure, but I'm pretty sure he was. Okay, so moving on, they obviously have him arrested now. They're accusing him of blasphemy, and then Peter disowns Jesus right after that. And so what this looks like is Peter is frantic. His best friend and Messiah and Savior of the world just got arrested. He's running around the city trying to follow Jesus, trying to like keep an eye on him and see what's going on and process all of this. And somebody came up to him and said, "You were also there with Jesus of Galilee," she said, but he denied it before them all. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. So in my eyes, he's probably walking past these big crowds of people, terrified that if he admits that he was with Jesus, that they're going to arrest him too, or they're going to, stone him or whatever. And so he's like, "No, I don't know him." And he's just running the other direction, trying to keep away. So then he went to the gateway and saw another servant girl. And then she said to the people there, "This fellow was with the Jesus of Nazareth." Verse 72, he denied it again with an oath, "I don't know the man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." So then he's cussing at them, basically, is what I'm taking this as, and basically saying, like, "You need to get out of here. I don't know him. Please stop talking to me." But he didn't say please. Immediately the rooster crowed, and then verse 75, then Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken, "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. And I really think that Peter did this not even realize what he was doing. I don't think that he stood there confidently and was like, "I don't know Jesus," and was like standing with the Romans. I think he was scared, and he was running around the city, and he was asked or told, this guy knows him, and he's like, "No, I don't. No, I don't." And it wasn't "I don't believe in him." It was like "Please don't associate me right now. I'm scared for my life." And that's relatable. It is, honestly. I hate to say that, but it is. When you think about it like that.
And so after that, the next morning, in chapter 27, the chief priests and the elders took counsel against Jesus to put him to death, and they bound him and led him away and delivered him to Pilate the governor, who was a Roman and was the one in charge. Now, in between this and Pilate happening, we see the demise of Judas, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And so it says in verse 3, then when Judas, his betrayer, saw Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." And they said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." Yeah. And then he threw down the pieces of silver into the temple. He departed and went and hanged himself. Which is very interesting, because it's almost like, even though it seems like he watched this whole, I don't know if you want to call it a debate or accusation or trial or whatever you want to call it, that the Sanhedrin had with Jesus. But he supposedly was watching all of this.
Yeah.
And then he realized at the end, oh, he's actually innocent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can't have this money anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure the guilt was consuming.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, obviously.
I was like, obviously, he went out and he took his own life.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, verse 9, it says, "Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took the 30 pieces of silver, the price set on him by the people of Israel, and they used them to buy the potter's field, as the Lord commanded me." 30 pieces of silver at the time was the equivalent to buying a slave. And so he was bought for nothing, basically. And Judas realized that. And I think that Judas probably had that realization of like, wait, he is the Son of God, and he's not going to do what I thought he was going to do. Like, I was wrong, and that's intense. I mean, I've had those moments. Not that I was questioning God being God, but I was questioning what I thought God was about to do in my life, and then it didn't happen, and then I'm questioning him, and I'm like, no, I never had him wrong. I had this perception in my own head of who he should be, and that was a me problem, not a him problem. So I think a lot of us do that, but it's intense when the whole Savior of the world's life is on the table. Yeah.
Okay, so then after that, Jesus is taken before the governor, who's Pilate, and it's almost like the governor is asking, "Are you the king of the Jews? Are you claiming to be who they say you are?"
Because Pilate hasn't had much exposure to Jesus up until this point. The Sadducees and the Pharisees have been the one like going at it with him, but Pilate's the governor of Rome. He's like,
he's probably heard of him,
right?
Because he had such a following and everything.
Well, and it says in verse 19, "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." So, like,
that was his wife saying that.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, that was his wife. But what I meant to say in that was, like, I think his wife maybe even had a deeper understanding of Jesus and was giving Pilate more of an understanding or information about Jesus through his wife. You know, where maybe he was learning more and more. Yeah. Okay, anyways, continue.
Yeah, no, you're fine. But pretty much... Jesus said, "You have said so," and so, but when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. So I thought that was interesting that he answered to Pilate, but he didn't answer
to them.
Yeah. So after this, then it says, at this feast, after the Passover feast, the governor customarily would release to the crowd any one prisoner that they wanted. And so him seeing that Jesus was obviously innocent was like, "Let me give him back to you. Like, I'll release him. He hasn't done anything wrong." And they're like, "No, we want Barabbas," who was a notorious criminal. It doesn't say what his crimes were specifically. He just says he was a notorious prisoner. So I'm assuming his crimes were quite great.
He had been there a few times.
Yeah, and it may say in one of the other Gospels, and we could get to that later. But the people said, "No, we want Barabbas. We don't want Jesus." And so at that point, Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning. So they really wanted Barabbas and really did not want Jesus, which is the exact opposite of what had been happening the week before when they were shouting, "Hosanna, this is the Son of David."
Yeah.
As he was coming into the kingdom. And then he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." Then he released from Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting was he said, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it to yourselves." And then the people said, "His blood be on us and on our children." Now, I have heard and read that some people debate on whether or not this right here was a direct result of, or not a result of, that this, the people saying that his blood be on us and on our children, was why Jerusalem fell in 70 AD. So it was several years after this, but that's why Jerusalem fell. Like, it was a punishment for accepting the blood of Jesus on them and their children.
His blood is on us and our children.
And Jerusalem's been back and forth ever since this time.
Right. Well, and I think it's crazy that most of Jerusalem, up until Pilate arrests him, or up until the Sanhedrin arrests him, most of them were pro-Jesus. Which is what's so crazy to me, that there was such a crowd of people. But what I will say is that you kind of see the crowds turn in his last few messages or whatever to the people. And not that they turn, but you start to see more kind of deeper questions. Like, they didn't like that he told them that they need to still pay their taxes to Caesar. They didn't like that. They were like, "What do you mean?"
Well, and I kind of imagine also, like, the scribes and the Pharisees, like, going around and, like, sowing discord almost.
Yes.
Like, they're going up to, you know, the people in the church that, you know, are the chatty Cathys that are going to spread all the gossip and be like, "Do you hear what this person's saying?" Like, this is, I could see that happening. Like, there's no way that he's the Son of God because of this, and this.
Yes.
Like, there's no way, like, he can't be doing this, blah, 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 blah. And so I think if you get enough of that happening,
I think it's
kind of where
it spreads fast.
Yeah, it spreads fast, and that's kind of where we ended up going with all of this.
Well, and I think too, like, I was looking for something else in Mark, but I can't find it right now. But it says that, you know, when Peter was running around and asking, like, this guy knows the man, I think even the disciples disowning or Peter disowning him, and maybe the disciples being scattered, like it started to start some unbelief. You know, he's now arrested, and then they see Peter, who was like one of his right-hand men, and he's like, oh, I don't even know the guy. Like, obviously, then people are going to be like, okay, well, what's going on then? I thought he was the Messiah, and now he's just, like, folding to this, and you guys don't even know him? What's going on? So I'm sure that was going on. And then you never know, too, just like what you said. If the Pharisees and Sadducees were saying that, and they planted a seed in 10 men, and those 10 men went out and planted the same seed, I mean, it could just happen so fast.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So after he released Barabbas, then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters. This is where they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. They put the crown of thorns on his head. They put a reed in his hand, and then kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." And they spit on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him and led him away to crucify him. And again, I have heard this said that the King of the Jews was like almost a slap in the face.
Yeah.
Because there was a King of the Jews at the time.
Yeah.
I think it was a King Herod.
Yes,
if I remember correctly. It's not the same one that was king whenever Jesus was born and plotted to kill him. It's a different one.
Yes.
But
it is, because you have Herodian, and then you have Herod, and then you have Pilate, who was like a governor. So it's like in the United States of America, Herod would be like the president, and then Pilate was like the governor of Jerusalem, so like our state governor, you know, for here in America.
Yeah. So them saying like, haha, you're the king, because we just dressed you up like one, even though we're about to kill you, was very much a slap in the face. So then, after they were going to take him to be crucified, he obviously had been beaten so terribly badly that he could not carry his own cross. So it says that they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name, and they compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink. And when they had crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots. They sat down and kept watch over him there. And over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." So again, they were mocking him again, even as he was dying. They still had the sign above his head. And then they mocked him for quite a while. Even the robbers next to him were mocking him. And then in verse 45, it says, "Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And some of the bystanders hearing it said, "This man is calling Elijah." And then Jesus cried out with a loud voice again and yielded up his spirit. And after he did that, it says, "Behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split. The tombs were also opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many." I thought this was interesting. Whenever I read those couple verses, I was like, I don't know that I ever processed that or noticed that before, because it says that the tombs were open and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised and came out of the tombs and then went into the holy city and appeared to people. So this is essentially saying that people were raised from the dead and then they started walking around talking to people.
So, and I am curious if it said they went to the holy city. So, I mean, I'm like, did they just go to heaven? But no, I mean,
I think the holy city is Jerusalem.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm curious as we continue to go through the Gospels to see other text around this subject. I'm going to pull up my commentary and see what it says on that, because I bet it touches on that.
Mine, just at the bottom of my Bible, says the saints who had fallen asleep were probably pious Old Testament figures and godly intertestamental Jews, re-embodied to witness to the new order of things that were now in the process of dawning. This shows that the resurrection of people who died looking forward to the Messiah depends on Christ's actual death and resurrection, just as does the future resurrection of Jesus' disciples today. And then, on the part where it says coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city, it says Matthew apparently jumps ahead here and begins to speak of events that would happen after the resurrection. The wording suggests that these saints were not merely brought back to life like Lazarus, but were raised with new resurrection bodies, a foretaste of what would happen to all believers at Christ's return. No other historical information about this event has been found, but it is natural to suppose that if they did have resurrection bodies, they would not have died again. They may have been taken up to heaven at or after Jesus' ascension, as mentioned in Acts 1 through 11.
Yeah, this is one of the strangest passages in the Gospel of Matthew. We don't know about this event from any other source, and Matthew doesn't tell us very much, so we really don't know what this was all about. But apparently these resuscitated saints died once again because they were raised from the dead in the sense that Lazarus was, not to resurrection life as Jesus, but to die again as Lazarus. So, like, it's comparing Lazarus' resurrection to Jesus's.
Well, that was just the opposite of what this
says. That's why I read that, because I'm like...
Yeah, that was the exact opposite of what
because this says they were raised not to converse again as heretofore with men, but to accompany Christ that raised them into heaven, and to be as so many demonstrations of Christ's quickening power. That was a quote from somebody else.
Yeah, this says that these saints were not merely brought back to life like Lazarus, but were raised with new resurrection bodies, a foretaste of what would happen to all believers at Christ's return.
That's so interesting but I think you're right, and I think that's right, because this says the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life, whereas Lazarus and Jairus' daughter, he said they were just asleep.
Yeah.
And this says these people died in resurrection. I don't know. Put it on the list of questions for God one day.
Yeah.
If any of you know the answer to this, go ahead and let us know.
Yeah.
One thing I want to know before we move on from the crucifixion.
Okay.
So I read this in a book that I was, a devotional that I have. And I thought it was so good I wrote it down in here to talk about it. But it says whenever Jesus died, there was an earthquake and the curtain split and the earth shook. So in that moment, many people said, it says in verse 54... that they were terrified and exclaimed, surely he was the Son of God. So many people were like, oh no, oh no, what have we done? And so this was a very interesting take. It was comparing Mary Magdalene and Mary and the people that loved Jesus that were at the cross, which it says among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. So this was like basically the main women that were in his ministry were there. It's interesting to me that none of the disciples were there. I think it was probably out of fear. But anyways, it was comparing them and their emotions and that feeling when the earth shook, what they felt compared to the soldiers and all the people that crucified Jesus. Okay, because that was two completely different emotions when that earth shook and they realized, like, no, he was God. Okay, so it says the resurrection of Christ is a subject of terror to the servants of sin. So a subject of terror to the people living in sin, the people that don't know God. And a subject of consolation to the sons of God, because it is proof of the resurrection of both, the one to shame and everlasting contempt, and the other to eternal joy and glory. And I don't think that that is saying that they are subject to shame forever. I think what that's saying is like the resurrection itself opened up that door for both things to simultaneously exist with this resurrection power, because Mary and Martha and his mom and all the people that loved him recognized in that moment, like, no, this is our eternal joy. Like, he may be dead now, but like we now have that proof. So it's like they were mourning him and they were sad, but they also knew in their hearts, like, though that was a guarantee for us, he is God, and so there is going to be good in this, even if we're sad because he's gone. And then you have the other side of the coin where they are overwhelmed with shame and with regret and with everlasting contempt, is what this quote says, because they've realized, no, he was the Son of God, and we just killed him, and we just mocked him, and we just stabbed him and betrayed him, and so, not that there's not grace for those people, but that overwhelming feeling is kind of what it was combating. And so I think that the base of that is faith. So it's like, for you, how are you interpreting the situations around your life? I'm going to get preachy for a second, because as things happen and trials and tribulations and suffering and all these things, are we going to be the one that says, I know my God is my God and I know who he is, and so I know that there's going to be good out of this, and I know I can still have joy and I can still trust him? Or are we going to be the ones that allow the shame and the condemnation of our circumstances to cripple us into a point where we can't see God for who God is anymore because we're too in the way? Anyways, I wanted to add that in. Okay. So
after he died and there was the curtain torn in two and the earthquake, and everything. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. And he essentially went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Because also, the next day was the Passover. And they could not have bodies hanging up on the hill during the Passover. That had to be taken down. And so Pilate granted him permission, and he took the body and he laid it in his own tomb. His family's tomb. Now, in this time, a lot of people had family tombs because they didn't put them in the ground. They had more of a tomb that was built out of rock for their families.
He said he placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock.
Yeah. And then he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the doorway and went away. And then the next day, that is after the day of preparation, a bunch of chief priests and Pharisees went before Pilate, and they were like, hey, we remember he said that he was going to come back to life in 3 days. Can we please put a guard out there because his disciples might come and take the body and be like, look, he raised from the dead.
And it says this last deception will be worse than the first. So they were worried that like they were going to fake prove his resurrection and disprove all of it.
Yeah. And there was such a big uproar with Jesus the first time that if he actually defeated death and came back to life, it was going to be even worse for all of them. And then they were scared of that. Joke's on them, it happened anyway. For real, not the disciples stealing his body. And so they put a guard and made the tomb secure. And then we get into chapter 28.
The exciting part.
Yeah.
And I love, we won't read all of this because we have already read it all to you, but I love that the first person that he appears to, because it says after the Sabbath day, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was another earthquake, for the angel came down, rolled back the stone, and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were afraid, and they shook and became like dead men. But then he says to the women, do not be afraid, for I know you're looking for Jesus. He's not here. Go on a little bit further down. Go quickly and tell the disciples he has risen from the dead, and he's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you. So the women were the first people to ever hear the gospel. So this is just a pump up for you women for a second of like, anybody that tells you that you don't hold that same power to like share the gospel and to love Jesus as a man does is total blasphemy, because this proves that like he wanted those women to be the first ones. He wanted them because of their hearts for him. Like they loved him past what he could do for them.
Yes. And it's even further proof for the resurrection.
Yeah.
Because at that time, women did not hold any power, did not hold any standing. Their word was not, I don't want to say believed, but it was not taken
with the same
authority. Power or authority that
man was here and women were here.
Yeah,
and you couldn't change anybody's mind here.
So why would Jesus appear to the most lowly, undeserving, the lowest people on the totem pole if he really, like, he wouldn't have started with them.
Yeah.
And even like when they went, I don't think it talks about it in Matthew, but in the other gospels it talks about the women running back, and then the disciples automatically take off for the tomb and are racing each other there because they almost have to see it to believe it.
Yeah. Well, and it says that even Jesus appeared to the women, and they saw him and they worshiped him. And then he says, go tell my brothers. And so, they go and tell him. It says when the 11 disciples went into Galilee to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. But I think before, it might be in John, actually. I think it says.
I don't think it's here in Matthew. It's
another one. But I mean, who would not? Especially because, Jesus has died, and I think those 3 days, probably most of what they all did was sit either in small groups together or completely by themselves, just like, what?
What do we do now?
What do we do now? What just happened? Am I supposed to go preach? They're going to kill me if I preach. Like, I cannot even imagine the whirlwind that was going through their heads during those 3 days. And so for then Mary, who they obviously trusted and loved, to come to them and be like, no, he's alive. They all did take off running, I'm sure. That'd be so cool to like, I've kind of always wanted to be able to like sit down in heaven with like a VCR of like every season of life. I want to see the disciples running to the tomb.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways.
And then it talks about while they were going, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests everything that happened. And then the elders were like, hey, we're still going to say that the disciples stole his body.
We're going to cover this up.
Because, one, we don't want you to get in trouble with the governor, because that was a big no-no, that the thing that you were guarding has disappeared. That's not doing your job. So we're going to say that the disciples stole his body. That way you don't get in trouble. And that way we can still sow some discord, and we can make it to where people don't believe that he actually raised from the dead. And my Bible even says, and this story has been spread among the Jews to this day.
Yeah, that's what mine says. And the story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that just shows you too. I mean, we see everywhere today in 2025 how much this Bible is taken out of context and preached against itself. And so things like that easily happen even today, but it's crazy that like things like that happened then, thousands of years later, are still like lies that are being believed as truth, right? And so it's like we have to be so careful even when consuming this stuff. Like, we just both read 2 different commentaries that totally contradicted each other. And so it's like you have to read this text for what it is, and then in your studying kind of have that discernment, because I know I can believe everything on this. I also don't know that I cannot believe everything on Google. So you've got to kind of, take everything with a grain of salt, except for what's in this book. So one of my favorite parts about this is at the end of verse 8, or at the end of chapter 28, verse 18, he says, "Then Jesus came to them and said, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age.'" And why I love this is because I think it couples directly into Luke 10, where he's talking to the disciples and telling them about how he's given them the power and authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and the dominions and darknesses of this world. Like, I've heard so many people say, why would God give us the tree in the first place? Why would God even allow free will? Why would he allow us to be on this earth if he loves us so much, with all this evil and all this hate and like Satan and demons and all these things? And it's like he has put us here, but he also hasn't put us here without power. He put us here with the power of himself and the Holy Spirit inside of us to trample on all of these things, to move in confidence and authority and not have any fear and carry peace. Like, he has all that for us. Getting there is why most people mess up, because they don't want to do what it takes to actually get there with God. But he did not leave us in this broken world with no hope and without any hope in the midst of our trials and suffering and circumstances and all of that stuff. And so it says, "And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." And that's just, I don't know, it's crazy to me when I really break down these as more than just words and think about, Jesus being on this earth, the same earth we are on 2,000 years ago, and all of this happening, and then him promising his disciples that, and it still being true for me and you sitting in Tuttle, Oklahoma on a Wednesday. I don't even know what day it is. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. I just love, like, even the last, "And behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age." It's almost like Matthew was like, take this little bit and hold on to this. Yeah. Like, this is what I'm leaving you with, that Jesus is with you always.
And I think that's what they were holding on to too.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that they all felt very lost and confused even after he was resurrected. I mean, he came back to life and was here for 40 days, and then he went back into heaven, and they didn't have him anymore. I mean, they got the Holy Spirit, but it is different than having a person sitting right in front of you that you can hug and talk to. And so, I'm sure they went through a lot of emotions and crazy seasons and, questioning and doubting, but it just goes to show that, like, I don't know, the consistency of Jesus's love for each of his disciples and being with them and walking with them in their change, like, it's the same story that we see in ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and even all of the disciples except for John ended up being killed.
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Jesus did tell them that, and they all, they were all very gung-ho for it, but probably didn't really understand the severity of that. But I think if Jesus would have said, "Okay, Peter, you're going to die by upside-down crucifixion in 30 years," Peter would have been like, "I'm going to avoid that city in that time frame 100%, And so we would all do that if we all knew all the bad things that were going to happen during our journey on this world. So there's beauty in the mystery for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is Matthew.
That is Matthew.
We got through our first book of the Bible together. And next week we will start with Mark.
Yes.
We have already been reading it on Instagram and YouTube, but we will come back next week with our first recap on Mark.
Yeah, and I think with Mark being a little bit shorter and it being over all the same stuff that we've covered in Matthew, minus a few new things that are added in, we'll probably do one big recap for Mark, unless we just get too much talking and it ends up too long. We'll probably just do one big recap and highlight all the things that are in Mark that were different than what we read in Matthew. But if there's anything that you guys read or that you see or that you want to talk about deeper, again, don't hesitate to reach out and tell us that, and we will make sure we add it into that recap when we do it.
All right.
Okay, we love you, God loves you more, and we will see you on the next recap.